Hey friend, I'm Micah McCurry. Thank you so very much for tuning in to Bible Tract Echoes. It seems like we just began this week, but today we come to the conclusion. Dr. Paul Levine concludes a wonderful message, By the Will of God. A great message talking about God's plans for your life and how they are, yes, personal. He's got an individual will for your life. They're perfect. They can't be compared with. They're pleasant. And serving God's enjoyable. But today we're going to talk about the fact that God's will is priceless. It's not worth selling for anything. Anything that can be compared to it might as well just be dust and dirt and grime. God's will is priceless. I'm going to encourage you to tune your heart. Maybe pray right now that you'd have a soft heart and open ears to what God has for us today. Listen to Dr. Paul bear his heart and bear this burden from decades ago.
Now listen here, folks, you want joy, you want happiness, you want a good life, you want a happy life, you want your work to be good, you want your calling to be right, you want your right wife, right husband, right work, right everything. Just get inside the will of God and surrender your life to the will of God and let Him work it out for you. You'll find out that God's will is personal. He's interested in you, and you'll find out it's perfect, better than anything you could ever dream up. And you'll find out it's pleasant, and you find out something else is priceless. Don't let anything rob you of it. You know, they tell me that the way they catch monkeys in some areas, they take a gourd or they take a box and they drill a hole in it big enough for the monkey to get his paw in there. Once he gets his paw in there, he finds a piece of sugar or some sweet thing. So he gets his little paw, little fist around that piece of sugar or whatever that little sweet thing is, and then he can't pull it out of that box. And the poor, stupid little animal, rather than to let go of that sweet little thing, and pull his paw out of there and skadoodle, you know what he'll do? Hang on to that sweet little thing, and you can walk right up and with a ball bat beat his brains out till they run out all over him. Just because of that sweet little thing. Can you see yourself in that? I've seen it. Oh, say somebody says, I can't do the will of God. I don't want to do the will of God. I got that sweet little thing. Well, you have. What is that sweet little thing? Might be a sweet little girl you intend to marry, but she might be an unsaved girl. Or that boy you're thinking about marrying. That sweet little thing. It might be that job you have. You say, I can't give up this job. It might be that big salary you have. A man in a restaurant in Bloomington, Illinois told me, he said, I'm called to preach, but he says, I figure that if I run this restaurant for 3 more years, I'll have X number of dollars, and after I get that money, then I'll go to school and learn to be a preacher. I said to my wife, he never will go, and he never has to my knowledge. If God's called you, He's called you to obey Him now, not 3 years from now. But you see, he had that sweet little thing. He had that job. He had that salary. He had that beautiful home. With you, it's something else. It's some pleasure. You know what's going to keep some people from the will of God and from being used of God? A little thing that long. It's going to be that sweet little cigarette. Or that little can that big around, a can of beer. They're going to throw the whole life away over beer. Smash their whole future over cigarettes. Or over dope. Or dirty literature or something else. Listen, young folks, the will of God is so wonderful, it's priceless. Don't let anything or anybody keep you out of it. It's pleasant inside the will of God. So why should you get out of the will of God because of some little thing that's not going to be worth anything after a while anyhow? You know, some young folks have smashed their whole future and got out of the will of God, stayed out of the will of God just by a bad attitude. Hate their mother. Hate their dad. Quarrel with their mother and dad all the time. Never say a decent word to their mother. Never say a decent word to their dad. How long has it been since you put your arms around your mother and say, Mother, I love you? Or Dad, I love you? Have you ever got on your knees and say, oh God, help me to get right with my mom, now get right with my dad. I have dishonored them. I have not honored them with the right kind of an attitude. I even obeyed them without honoring them. And I need to get right with my mother and dad, and many young folks will never be what they ought to be, and they'll never sit on this platform like these men are sitting here, or sit at that piano like those ladies over there have sat by that piano this week. They'll never be there because of a bad attitude at home, or a bad attitude at school somewhere else. That sweet little thing. They'd rather hang on to that bitterness and that hate. Let me say one more thing before we go. God's will, you'll find out, young folks, God's interested in you personally. It's personal, it's perfect, it's pleasant, it's priceless, and it's possible. It's possible for you. Boy, you know what made me happy tonight? To see a great multitude of you walk right down these aisles and on your knees before God, surrender your life completely to Him and say, Lord, you work it out now so that I get into the center of your will. And if you'll surrender your will and seek His will, He will work out His will for you. It's possible. You see, God's looking for young people. Some of us are getting old. Good night, I'm 66 years old. I ain't going to preach anymore in about 50, 60 more years. And one of these days, I'll be gone. We've got to have some new ones coming in. Even these fellas are getting old back here now. And so, you got to have some new ones. And God's looking in this crowd right tonight for preachers and evangelists and Bible teachers and women to marry them. And God's looking for special people. He's got for special jobs. God's looking for you. Some of you work bang a typewriter all day for God, or dig ditches, or fix fences, or print literature, or do something else. God's looking for some more of you. And it's possible for you to be in the will of God, but not unless you yield your own will to Him. God's looking for some young people with class. You got class, or are you a jerk? You got some real class? So what do you mean by class? Let me illustrate it. There's a boy up in northern Michigan, and he loved to play basketball. And they were going to have the tournament, and so the coach called him in, and he said, now, for the tournament, we're going to practice on Wednesday nights. And this boy, his first name is Ivan, said, sorry, coach, I can't practice on Wednesday night. And he said, why not? Why? He said, that's prayer meeting night in our church, and on Wednesday night, I go to prayer meeting. So I can't practice. Made the coach angry. He said, you can't practice with us on Wednesday night. You're off the team. Hand in your suit. So I haven't handed in his suit. And it must have been a hard thing to do. If he loved to play basketball 1/10 as much as I like to play baseball, well, then I know how he felt. But the coach watched him. He didn't get bitter. He didn't wallow in self-pity. He wasn't a crybaby. He didn't boo-hoo and beller around. No, sir. He had class, young people. God's looking for young folks, real class. Yeah. He had it. He had the class. Lord looking at him, there he is, studying, working, rejoicing, smiling, happy, going to church on Wednesday night. You see, God was getting ready to start a church in a western town. And from this church in that western town, He was going to found or begin 60 more in several surrounding states. Now get a picture of this. Here's a church, and surrounding that church in other states and in that state also, 60 more churches. I've held meetings in some of these branch churches. I've held meetings in this church I'm telling you about. See, God was going to start this church in this town and these 60 others, and then He's going to start a young people's camp. Now, I preached a good number of weeks in this young people's camp. But now, in order for God to get this going, God had to have a man. Again, God did not choose a committee. He did not choose a group. He chose a man. You got to find a man. Well, now, look, if God's going to have a man to pastor that kind of a church, that's going to start 60 more churches, going to start a young people's camp and some more works, then He's got to have a boy or a young man with some class, with some holy grit, with some dedication, with some endurance that Brother Svinsky was talking about today. And he found that young boy way up in a little town in northern Michigan. Now, what kind of a boy did he find? He found a boy. Did he find a boy who said to his dad, and he said to his mother, and he said to the pastor, now for several weeks I can't practice, I can't be in prayer meeting on Wednesday night. Well, you can't. You can't be in Wednesday night prayer meeting now for several weeks? No. Why not? I have to practice basketball. If that young man would have said that, he'd have never pastored that church. If he didn't have any more class than that, if he didn't have more dedication than that, and endurance in that, and faith in that, God never used him. Now you got to make up your mind you're going to be somebody special for God. No, God chose a young man who said, I can't practice on Wednesday night because I go to a prayer meeting on Wednesday night. That's the kind God took, and God planned him over there, and that's exactly the way it worked out. Now, what was possible for that young man is possible for you, and what was possible for that young man's wife can be possible for some of you girls here tonight. Now look at the difference between that and Clarence Darrow, famous atheist lawyer. When he was dying, he was the lawyer, in that famous Scopes trial over here in Tennessee, that evolution trial. Boasted that he was an infidel, an atheist. When he was dying, somebody walked in his room, and on a table was a Schofield Bible. And this Schofield Bible was lying there on the table, and See if I had written down here yes, I did. I think it's Luke 15, Luke 5:15. Don't look it up now, but I think it was Luke 5:15. They walked in, here's a Schofield Bible, open to Luke 5:15, with a circle around the verse. Somebody said to the dying man, what does that mean? That Bible there. See, he's an infidel. What's that Bible mean? How come it's open to that page? How come that verse is marked? He says, because that's the story of my life. You know what the verse says? Something like this. We have toiled all night and caught nothing. And when Clarence Darrow, with all of his money and all of his popularity and all of his fame and all of his riches, when he's dying, he says, I've blown my whole life, I've worked my whole life and caught nothing. But the work that young man started out there in that western slopes of the West, that work is going on today and no doubt will go on until Jesus comes. Young folks, doesn't it thrill you tonight that you can become a part of God's will? Every one of you young men, young women, you say, what do I do? How do I start it? What do I do to get there? The first thing you do is make a once and for all and forever 100% without any reservation and without any hesitation surrender of your life and your will to God. And we're going to help you do it. And we want you to do it right now. Let's bow in prayer.
Friend, as we conclude this week, what a time we've had to listen to Dr. Paul. What a marvelous speaker he is. What a marvelous speaker he was. He went to heaven in 1996, but you can feel the fervor, the fervency come through even now. But I've got to ask, are you missing God's will? Are you missing God's will for your life? I sure hope not. I'd ask you, if you would, friend, to ponder that question. If you have questions, a comment, a critique, or even a concern, I'd love to hear from you. You can text me at 309-316-7240. Again, that's 309-316-7240. I'd encourage you, friend, to make sure today that you are in the center of God's will. Thank you so very much for tuning in. My prayer is simple, and my prayer has been the same just about every day. It's this, that you have a great day, and how about a great weekend for God's glory. We will plan on talking to you soon with a brand new week of broadcasting next week here on Bible Tract Echoes. I'm Micah McCurry. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.
Thank you for joining us today for Bible Tract Echoes, a ministry of Bible Tracts Incorporated. If you would like to receive a free sample booklet of all of our tracts, you can contact us by calling 309-828-6888. That's 309-828-6888. Our mailing address is P.O. Box 130, Dwight, Illinois 60420. A faster way to contact us is to go to our website at BibleTractsInc.org. That's BibleTractsInc.org. There you will find more information about our ministry and details on how you can support Bible Tracts Incorporated. Thanks for listening, and may the Lord richly bless you as you serve Him.